Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Deuteronomy chapter 22. As Moses continues to repeat the laws that God has given to Israel, he begins to focus on how the Israelites should treat each other, specifically their responsibility to help their neighbors and abstain from sexual immorality. And of course, that's big points of emphasis for us as Christians too. Now, this is a specific covenant for a specific people in a specific time, but we too can uncover wisdom in these laws and commands if we look for it. And so if you want to join our community of Christ followers studying the Bible together, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment or question below. This chapter also deals with themes of sexual assault, so viewer discretion is advised. You shall not see your countryman's ox or his sheep straying away, and pay no attention to them. You shall certainly bring them back to your countrymen. If your countryman is not near you, or if you do not know him, then you shall bring it home to your house, and it shall remain with you until your countryman looks for it. Then you shall restore it to him. Thus you shall do with his donkey, and you shall do the same with his garment, and you shall do likewise with anything lost by your countryman, which he has lost and you have found. You are not allowed to neglect them. You shall not see your countryman's donkey or his ox fallen down on the way, and pay no attention to them. You shall certainly help him to raise them up. These property laws are repeated and expounded on from Exodus 23. Anything that you find that belongs to your neighbor, whether it's his donkey, his ox, or his clothing, not only can you not take it for yourself, you actually have the obligation to take it and bring it back to your neighbor. And if you don't know whose it is, you can't use that as an excuse. You have to take it back to your house and wait for your neighbor to come looking for it. And as with so many of the laws in the Torah, this creates a sense of brotherhood and family among all the people of Israel. Now, naturally, you yourself will probably never be in a circumstance exactly like this, where you find your neighbor's ox wandering around. But it reminds us that everybody has a responsibility to love their neighbor and help them when they're in need. That sense of empathy isn't going above and beyond. It's not being a good Samaritan. This is the bare minimum. This is what's expected of you. A woman shall not wear man's clothing, nor shall a man put on a woman's clothing. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. This verse is, of course, incredibly controversial today, but that's not exactly a recent development. Even back in medieval times, right? This verse was used against Joan of Arc in her trial because she wore men's armor into battle. What makes it especially tricky is the fact that fashion styles and trends change over time. Even 100 years ago, women wearing pants in America was seen as progressive, but today it's actually more of the norm than a woman wearing a dress. And I think that's important to address here. Moses never says what counts as a man's clothing and as a woman's clothing, but he does say not to switch. At the point in time when Deuteronomy was written, Moses probably had things like head coverings in mind. After all, both men and women would be wearing tunics that we would say look like a dress. So to really understand this verse in the Bible and any other controversial verses of the Bible, we have to think about what it meant for the Israelites back then and what it means for us today. And I think it boils down to ensuring that there are proper boundaries between men and women, so that everyone can be above reproach, and that everyone can make sure that no deception takes place. It doesn't mean that men and women are to be completely separated at all times. It doesn't mean that men are superior to women. After all, the same Apostle Paul, who wrote in favor of head coverings for women in 1 Corinthians 11, also wrote that in Christ there is no male and female. He said that in Galatians 3. It's also worth noting that this doesn't mean we shouldn't have compassion on people who are genuinely experiencing gender dysphoria and attempt to help them. But our physical bodies matter. Our sexual ethics and our behavior matters. And so if there's clothing that makes the differences in gender a little more clear for everyone, then we ought to keep that in mind so that we don't lead anyone astray. If you happen to come upon a bird's nest along the way, in any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, and the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, you shall not take the mother with the young. You shall certainly let the mother go, but the young you may take for yourself, in order that it may be well with you, and that you may prolong your days. Once again, in our time and culture, you probably won't really end up in a circumstance like this. I mean, I get my eggs from the grocery store. But this law actually has a similar logic to that one really weird one about boiling a young goat in its mother's milk from Deuteronomy 14 and Exodus 23 and 24. It's also similar to that law about not cutting down fruit trees for siege works in Deuteronomy 20. And the logic behind it is to keep life going, to keep God's creation going. We live in an imperfect world, and we are going to have to sacrifice some animals and plants' lives in order to sustain our own. But we're not supposed to do so in a way that destroys God's creation for everybody else. Therefore, when you find a nest of eggs, feel free to take the eggs, but don't take the mama bird with it too. Leave her alive so that she can produce more eggs for the future of her species and for the future of your neighbor, who one day might be starving and needs the eggs that that bird is going to create. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you will not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone falls from it. Now, on the other hand, this is a law that we kind of understand. We kind of get the inherent logic of it. We have similar building codes about guardrails for stairs and bridges and balconies. And we know that failure to obey these rules opens yourself up to legal liability. And the concept is the same here. If someone falls off your roof and injures themselves or dies because you didn't build a guardrail, then you are legally responsible for their injury or death. That's what it means to have blood guiltiness, right? That's a word that sounds intense when translated, but that's really all it means. And when we understand terms like this, it helps us understand all of the laws, especially the unfamiliar ones, and it helps us see it as a legal code, terms of a covenant between God and His people, so that blessings and goodness and righteousness would fill the land. You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, or all the produce of the seed which you have sown, and the increase of your vineyard will become defiled. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. You shall not wear a material mixed of wool and linen together. You shall make for yourself tassels on the four corners of your garment with which you cover yourself. And right on cue, there's another group of laws that don't really make sense to us. But you have to remember all of the emphasis that Moses has put on the Israelites staying separate from the Canaanites and separate from their pagan gods. By setting up these other barriers of separation, whether it's seeds or animals or garments, it reinforces this idea in the people's minds that they are set apart as their ox is from their donkey, or their wool is from their linen. At this point in time, the Israelites are called to be separate from all the other nations and the gods that those nations worship. And this too is why they wear tassels on their robes and cloaks, as a constant reminder that they have the privilege of living under a covenant with the Lord, Creator God. If any man takes a wife and goes into her and then turns against her and charges her with shameful deeds and publicly defames her, and says, I took this woman, but when I came near her, I did not find her a virgin. Then the girl's father and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of the girl's virginity to the elders of the city at the gate. The girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man for a wife, but he turned against her. And behold, he has charged her with shameful deeds, saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin, but this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. So the elders of that city shall take the man and chastise him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give it to the girl's father, because he publicly defamed a virgin of Israel. And she shall remain his wife, he cannot divorce her all his days. But if this charge is true, and that the girl was not found a virgin, then they shall bring out the girl to the doorway of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death, because she has committed an act of folly in Israel by playing the harlot in her father's house. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you. And once again, we have another text that can be confusing and off-putting, but let's remember the context. At its core, this is all about a test for virginity that's kind of left unsaid. Moses is presupposing that his audience knows about a cultural ritual, one where on the wedding night, the bride's parents would provide a bedsheet. Theoretically, when the woman's hymen breaks, that bedsheet will be stained with blood. and it can be cited as evidence that she remained a virgin until she was married. And while all of this, myself included, makes us feel uncomfortable, remember that this is not about shaming non-virgin women. The main purpose of this ritual was to exonerate the women who had done right, even if their husband slanders against them. The heart of this practice is about protecting women, not belittling them. One supposed problem, though, is that today we know that a hymen can break for all sorts of non-sexual interactions, whether that's sports or horseback riding or something else. But again, let's take into account the context that this law was given to a specific culture in a specific point in time. These were ancient Israelites, former slaves, traveling through the wilderness on their way to Canaan. So we can suppose that young girls at this time didn't have a lot of access to sports, and especially horseback riding. So hypothetically, this specific test for this specific culture would be a little bit more reliable. Now, Moses still makes clear that sexual immorality was a capital offense, in line with Leviticus 18 and 20. And while some might accuse this of being misogynistic, let's keep reading. If a man is found lying with a married woman, then both of them shall die, the man who lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. If there is a girl who is a virgin engaged to a man, and another man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death. The girl because she did not cry out in the city, and the man because he has violated his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you. But if in the field the man finds the girl who is engaged, and the man forces her and lies with her, then only the man who lies with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. There is no sin in the girl worthy of death. For just as a man rises against his neighbor and murders him, so it is in this case. When he found her in the field, the engaged girl cried out, but there was no one to save her. So we see that in cases of adultery, both the man and the woman were to be put to death. There's no gender bias there. And in cases of sexual assault, the woman is to go free because she is the victim. The man is to be put to death. Granted, Moses says that that's if the assault happens in a field, which is a figure of speech, meaning that there was no one around to witness it. In the city, especially in the densely populated cities of ancient Israel, there would have been many witnesses. And if the woman did not cry out for help, then that's seen as evidence of adultery and not assault. Our laws today are obviously a lot different from how this is laid out, and they should be. I mean, after all, this covenant was to a specific people for a specific time and place. But I still think that the entire Bible, even passages like this, hold wisdom for us. That wisdom is to refuse to let sin and destruction have a foothold in our society, but also to err on the side of grace, making sure that we're always protecting women and the vulnerable and the oppressed in our societies. If a man finds a girl who is a virgin, who is not engaged, and seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall become his wife, because he has violated her. He cannot divorce her all his days. A man shall not take his father's wife, so that he will not uncover his father's skirt. And wrapping up the laws on sexual ethics here, we have what to do in cases of premarital sex, where neither the man or the woman is married or engaged. The language used here is definitely stronger in the Hebrew, and that comes through in the English translation, but I don't think that the words translated as seize and violate are meant to convey sexual assault here. The woman is only seized in the same way that Abram took Sarai to be his wife in places like Genesis 11. But the language is intensified and amped up to show that even this consenting premarital sex was still sin. Now, the reason the woman is violated is because she's no longer a virgin, which means she can no longer be married as one. And we know that's really important in this society because of verses 13 to 21. So in cases of consenting premarital sex, what does God advise the people to do? Well, under this covenant, he says they ought to just go ahead and get married. And the final verse in this chapter is another repetition from Leviticus 18, barring incest from happening in the country of Israel. So in all, we see that this chapter is a list of practical sundry laws and sexual ethics. We saw that ancient Israel had the responsibility to take care of your neighbor and your neighbor's possessions. We also saw the importance of Israel staying separate from the other nations, as evidenced by their symbols of that separation. And then there were also laws that were meant to pledge Israel towards sexual morality. They were to be just and above reproach, punishing immorality when it did happen, but they were also called to protect women, especially when they were slandered against or there was no one around to save them. And we take all of that within the context of Jesus' own words in John 8. We today as Christians are not called to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Ultimately, vengeance is the Lord's. And that helps us remember that all of these laws were never about promoting violence. They were about atoning for sin that disrupted the relationship between God's people and God. Similarly, we need to continue to live our lives above reproach. And that's when it comes to all things, not just sexuality, but also protecting and helping our neighbors. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good day. God bless. Stay safe.